Well, here we are at the 8th lesson of the New England Fly Tyers video manual of fly tying. I'm your host, Dean Clark. Lesson 8 features another dry fly. However, the Adams is quite different than the white wolf of the previous lesson. The Adams, with its hackle-tip wings, is much more delicate in appearance than the bushy, hair-winged wolf. What are the challenges you'll meet as you tie the Adams? Well, for one thing, the collar will consist of 2 hackle feathers, each of a different color. The tail will test your material handling ability, for it too is a mixture of 2 colors. The shape of the body is much slimmer, so you'll need to use the dubbing fur sparingly. Now, let's move on to Lesson 8. The Adams is a must-have fly. If you were required by law to have in your possession only one dry fly pattern, this might be the one to choose. The configuration, that is proportion, sparseness, tying technique, etc., is in the classic Catskill dry fly style. What species of mayfly does it represent? None whatsoever. There is no such thing as an Adams hatch. This is an all-purpose generic fly designed to match no one particular species, yet it is effective on a wide variety of mayfly hatches. It sometimes works even when there is no hatch, and it's even been known to take trout during a caddis hatch. What makes the Adams such a great fly? One theory is the trout key in on the gray aspects of the fly during a hatch of grayish naturals and are attracted by the brown when brownish flies are on the water. Maybe so, but watch the moire effect going on in the hackle as it rotates. Looks alive, doesn't it? Does a trout notice the same effect as it sees the fly from different angles as it floats along? Whatever the reason, your fly box should contain the Adams in sizes from 10 to 18, or even smaller.
The most popular size for an Adams seems to be a 14. However, we're going to tie this on a size 12. If you feel real brave, you can do it on a 16 and an 18. A good color thread for this fly is gray, normally. However, we're going to tie this with a black so you'll be able to see it better on the screen. Now, if you've already used a muskrat fur on your previous pupa fly, your caddis, we're going to use the same material on the dry, only it's going to be a lot less material on the body. Your dry does not require quite as much material. Now, we're going to use a grizzly, and we're also going to use a brown. These are the 2 colors you're going to use, and keep in mind, the quality of your hackle is going to be the quality of your fly.
You already know how to put the thread on the hook, but its position is important. It should hang from a point 1/3 of a shank length back from the eye. This marks the wing position. The genetic hackle on the left has sharp, narrow tips. Many tyers prefer their hackle tip wings to have wider, rounded tips, as seen in the inexpensive imported feathers on the right. After selecting a pair, strip off the fibers so the tips are as long as twice the gape. Tie the far wing in first, using as little thread as possible. The standard Adams has wings mounted at a 45-degree angle from the vertical in what is known as the half-spent position. You'll find many uses for flat-bladed tweezers in your tying. To maintain proper wing separation, it's recommended that you use a figure-8 tying process. This allows you to use very few turns of thread and still keep the wings separated one from the other. Trim the butts and wind the thread back to the point of the hook. Well, now that you have the wings on, the proportional die has been cast. The position of the wing has already determined the horizontal proportions of the fly along the shank. If the wings are too far forward, where do you suppose the hackle collar will be? You got it. It'll be too far forward. There will be barely enough room for the hackle and none for the head. Besides that, the abdomen will be too long. If the wing is too far back, so will the hackle. And what about the abdomen and the head? You'll have a short abdomen and a long, unsightly head. The fly will not be visually or physically balanced. Of course, you could always extend the hackle forward to achieve a normal head, but the overall proportion is still not right. As you can see, there's no way to fix the balance or proportion once the wings are on. The wing is now where it belongs, at the 1/3 position. Everything else now will fall into its proper place. We haven't mentioned the tail yet. Almost every good dry fly tyer I know likes the tails longer than much of the literature recommends. Why? Well, we'll take that up later. But for now, let's get you back to finishing your fly. Select a small bunch of stiff brown hackle fibers, stripping them by pulling the stem away from the fibers and setting them aside. Do the same with the grizzly hackle and lay them next to each other with their tips aligned. Pick up both bunches by dampening a finger. Grip them close to the end of the butts. Measure them against the shank, then position them so they extend one shank length beyond the bend. On very small flies, a regular loose loop over may be impractical. By tying in the tail with a very small loop and a short thread, you can dispense with the pinch. Bind down the butts using a minimum of thread and return the thread to the tie point. And half hitch. Wax the thread and prepare the muskrat dubbing. Here's a neat way to eliminate all of the guard hairs. This is an eyebrow comb and mascara brush. A mustache comb will serve as well. The dubbing technique is essentially the same as before, except that the amount of dubbing is much less. Again, bring the body forward and leave a gap for the hackle. Select one brown and one grizzly hackle feather with barbules equal to 1.5 times the gape. Strip the fluff back to the web-free beginning of the sweet spot. tie them in under the hook, tight against the end of the dubbed abdomen. Now, bring the thread forward to just behind the eye. The gadget that was swung into place is a bobbin cradle, a necessary tool when using a rotary vise. Here's one reason some tires like a rotary vise. Tie off and half hitch. Wind the second hackle through the first. By moving the hackle back and forth, you will avoid binding down the barbules of the first hackle. Tie off, secure, and trim. Whip finishes small head and lacquer. Now, let's do a quick review of the tying sequence. You will often read in the literature of fly tying that the tail should be equal to the shank. Unfortunately, many books fail to tell you where that length is measured from. If the tail extends one shank length beyond where you tie it in, the tail will be too short and will fail to either float the fly properly or to pass the benchtop test. More on that in a moment. Notice that a line drawn from the hackle collar to the tip of the tail bisects the hook bend. If we extend the tail so it projects a shank length beyond the bend, the line will just miss the hook. If this line represents a hard surface, or benchtop, the fly will pass the benchtop test. Notice how this nicely proportioned fly is supported only by the hackle collar and the tail, while the hook not quite touches the surface. Many expert tyers check the balance and proportion of their flies with this simple benchtop test. Well, don't go away, because Paul Kubert is about to demonstrate some very essential dry fly fishing techniques. One of the skills of fly fishing is the ability to read the water. This includes, among other things, judging the speed and direction of the surface currents. All you need to do is watch whatever is floating on the surface. For example, those bits of floating foam, they'll tell you what you need to know. That's the easy part. The water in the top half of the screen is moving faster than the water in the lower half. The problem is, how do you cast the fly into the slow water while putting the line across the fast water, yet still achieve a drag-free float? That's the hard part. In this typical fly fishing situation, laying a line straight across the fast current makes a long drag-free float impossible. The line bellies down ahead of the fly and drags the fly with it. On a straight line, the fly will not move at the speed of the current it is in. It will move at the speed of the fastest current the line is in. The belly reveals the fastest current as clearly as a curve on a graph. On this next cast, watch the very end of the line. See how it is being dragged toward the fastest current? Wrong cast, wrong speed, wrong direction. To achieve a drag-free float, you can create an upstream belly that will delay the formation of the downstream belly. This is called mending the line. As soon as the line hits the water, flip the line upstream. Drag will not set in until the upstream belly disappears. Why is it important that the fly move at the same speed as the current is in? Because that's what the fish expect their food to do. Trout hold position by swimming upstream as fast as the current tries to take them downstream. To take a fly, natural or artificial, trout will stop swimming, letting the current carry them downstream. They adjust their pectoral fins like aircraft controls to lift them to the surface. Perhaps steering a bit right or left to get on line, and they meet the fly with an absolute minimum of effort. Obviously, this feeding behavior will not work if your fly is moving faster than the current and in the wrong direction. Instinct will not allow them to expend more energy in capturing a bit of food than that food will supply. To merely survive, they must at least break even between energy income and expense. To grow, they must show a net profit. They will chase a juicy baitfish or a streamer, but they'll rarely chase a dragging fly. You cannot fool a trout by offering them a net loss. Somehow they know a bad deal when they see it. Just before the line becomes straight and drag sets in, you can mend the line again. By repeated mending, you can gain the maximum drag-free float. However, as the line moves further downstream, mending will no longer work and the fly will begin to drag. When this happens, it's a good idea to let it float clear of the area you are fishing so the pickup will not disturb the fish. An even more effective way to present a drag-free float is to mend the line before it hits the water. Use a low sidearm cast, and as you release the line, flip the rod tip upstream. The goal is to lay the leader and a length of line in and parallel to the slower current flow. The fly leads the way, followed by the leader and the line. The first and only thing a fish will see is the fly. This method will trigger a rise even better than mending line, assuming your fly matches the hatch and the fish are feeding. Let's watch that cast again, this time in slow motion. The sidearm cast is made. Before the line settles to the water, the rod moves upstream. The line becomes parallel to the current flow, and the fly takes the point. Every inch of drag-free float that you can squeeze out of a cast increases your chances of inducing a rise.